So now I've got to communicate to the vehicle exactly how it needs to behave with the grid. And then you think, but it's a vehicle. It could be in the UK this week, and it could be in France next week, and it could be in Germany after that. And all the grids are different.
This is the point where we put our technical hats on, because you've talked a little bit about battery chemistries and things like that. So what are the actual components that need to be in place, either from a hardware point of view in the car, from a software point of view in the car, from a hardware point of view in the charger, or from a software point of view in the charger, to make the vehicle-to-grid ecosystem work for an individual?
So there's a couple of ways of doing it. I'm going to only talk about modern CCS and Type 2 connectors. So that's the big DC connector that the cars have in Europe. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. One way is what we call DC vehicle to grid, where the two big pins in the port that you see there, you basically connect the battery, terminal voltage, to a reverse charger or inverter, so big box on the wall, and that turns the DC into AC, which can then connect to the grid, and then you can get the power out of the vehicle in AC, an alternating current, which is what the grid uses. So we have to translate between battery voltage, which is DC, and grid voltage, which is AC. Don't need to know why, it's just that's it, and you need a box to do that translation. So there's quite a long chain there, and so first of all, you need a battery that's ready for this. But secondly, we need to be able to talk to, between the charger, the inverter, and the vehicle, we need to be able to say, okay, what have you got for me? How much power can you give me? Here's what, I can't give you this right now because I need to be 80% full by tomorrow or whatever. So that communication between the wall box, that is the thing that has been pretty much holding it up. There's a standard, I'm going to quote standard numbers at you, which is always
we love standard numbers
called ISO 15118-20, which defines how this is done. And that was only released in 2022. Which isn't very long in standards then. And that defines how you can do this with DC. And even then, there are still some gaps in the standard because it allows a lot of things to be optional at the moment. So things like the state of charge and the battery capacity, they're all optional. Not all the manufacturers make that data available. So it's kind of there, but not quite. And so there's a few kinks need to be worked out in the standard to make this just plug and play. So that work is ongoing now. Once you've got the battery and you've got the comms and then you've got this wall box, which is quite an expensive device, again, a few £1,000s. Then there's the grid code, because it has to connect to the grid code. We generally got that in the UK because it basically looks like a solar panel or something, very similar to a solar connection. So if you've got permission to connect to solar, if you've had to go through that permissions process, it's quite similar for a DC vehicle to grid. Once you've got all those things in place, that's good. So we're now able to connect to the grid safely and we can get power in and out. Good. Now we need to tell it what to do. And as I mentioned before, you personally might want to control it. That's fine. You can do that now. But then if the grid wants to control these things at scale with millions of devices, somebody somewhere needs to say, oh, can you charge now? Can you not charge now? And they need to do that in a standardized way. Well, that standard doesn't really exist yet. CPP 2.1, more standard numbers, does have all the commands in. Not many charge points have implemented that yet. It's still very new. But eventually that will allow your charge point to form part of this ecosystem where somebody can, send the commands to help it manage the grid, and your car will respond and it'll all just work. But those standards have been quite slow. So that's the DC picture, and it's great, and you can just about do that. And BMW are going to launch a service with that next year on the Neue Klasse, which is kind of cool. I think Mercedes are looking at. So you're going to see a few, but sticking point there is a several £1,000 wall box. Somebody's got to pay for that. That's kind of, so it's nice, works technically, but commercially not quite there yet. So there is another approach, which is the one that Renault have taken with the Renault 5, which is really clever. And that is, you've already got an onboard charger on your vehicle that turns AC into DC. And you plug into your wall box, plug into a 7 kilowatt outlet like this one behind. And on the car, there's a box somewhere hidden in the car, which takes the AC, turns it into DC, charges the battery. Brilliant. we can modify that box to go both ways, to turn it into an inverter. So instead of putting power AC into the car, we can take the DC out of the battery, turn it into AC, send it back out through the cable. That's AC vehicle to grid. Now, that modification inside the vehicle to do this is quite cheap. I mean, obviously, any change on the vehicles, but yeah, there's no like major new components. It's a small change to the inverter, so it allows manufacturers to add this capability into the vehicle for relatively little. You know, talking like tens of dollars here, literally, in terms of components. It's not very much. You can see why. You think, well, okay. Instead of needing a whole new expensive wall box, what we could do is modify the onboard charge in the vehicle so that it can export 7 kilowatts or whatever, and that way it takes a huge amount of the cost out. Fantastic. You know, this then makes it commercially viable. So this is where Renault have gone, and I think others will follow. Great. Let's do that. You know, let's do that now today. There's a slight problem in that now we've got the AC inverter is on the vehicle, and that's the bit that's going to follow what the grid is doing. So now I've got to communicate to the vehicle exactly how it needs to behave with the grid. And then you think, but it's a vehicle. It could be in the UK this week, and it could be in France next week, and it could be in Germany after that. And all the grids are different. So in order to make this, you can see where this is going. So in order to make this work, the charge point has to say, well, actually, now you're in the UK, so what you need to do, car, is this, this, and this to comply in the UK. Can you do that and do all the handshake and the chit-chat? So that's what we are waiting for now. Now, the standard to do that, which am I going to give you the whole title? ISO 15118-20 AMD1. Yeah, was supposed to be out last year. And we were all, as manufacturers, we're all getting really excited, waiting for this standard, because then we can implement it in charge points, and the manufacturers can implement it. Let's get going. Fortunately, it didn't get through the draft stage. There was a lot of questions, a lot of challenges, a lot of argument from different stakeholders, and it's gone back. So we're still working on that. And in order to try and move this forward, there's now an international consortium called Task 53, so you can look it up on the internet and find that's a very excitingly titled group. And that group is basically working on sorting this problem out. So that's where we are. So can we do it technically? Yes. Can we do it commercially? 100%. The commercial use cases there now. What's missing is the standardization of the ecosystem to get all these bits to talk together. So that's all that's missing at the moment, but it's a significant part, and that's what we're working on. So it was a very long answer, but we're getting there.